Recording in progress.
All right, good morning. Welcome to the regular board meeting of the Desert Water Agency on November 18th, 2025. We'll call this meeting to order. Some housekeeping for those of us in the room. Please mute your mobile devices so they don't disturb us during the meeting. And for those who are attending virtually, if you could mute your microphones and until you are ready to speak during public comment or otherwise called upon. Um, for the purposes of discussion and questions, I'll call on directors in the following roll call order. Director Gracia, excuse me, Director McKenna, Treasury Secretary Bloomer, Vice President Bowman, and President Ortega. And all votes will be conducted via roll call. With that, I would like to ask Secretary Treasurer Bloomer to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you. May we have the roll call vote, please, or the roll call, please?
Director Gracia,
Present.
Director McKenna,
Present.
Secretary Treasurer Bloomer,
Present.
Vice President Bowman,
Present.
and President Ortega.
Present.
All present.
Thank you. Item 4 would be for today is public comment on items that are not shown on today's agenda. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on items that have to do with the business of the water agency but are not shown on today's agenda. We ask if you would like to speak that you keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. And as provided in the Brown Act, the board is prohibited from acting on items not listed on the agenda today. Have we received any public comments prior to the meeting?
No comments have been received.
Okay. Do we have anyone in the room who would like to make public comment or on attending online? Seeing no one, we'll move to 5. Again, this is public comment for items that are listed on today's agenda, and we ask that you keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. Do we have anyone in the room or online that would like to speak on an agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move to the consent calendar. Items listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by one motion of the board without discussion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a board member requests the specific item to be discussed and or removed from the consent calendar for separate action. We have 3 items on the consent calendar today. Are any of these items something that a director would like to have pulled for further discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll look for a motion.
I'll move the consent calendar, item 6, as presented.
All right,
I'll second.
thank you. There's a first from Director Gracia and a second from Secretary Treasurer Bloomer. May we have the roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director McKenna,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer Bloomer,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. So item 7 is an action item. 7A, request acceptance of the Desert Water Agency 2025-2030 strategic plan. And this would be now our general manager. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you,
morning.
Mr. President, members of the board. Good morning. So as you're aware, Desert Water Agency first began developing this 5-year strategic plan back in late 2024. And its goal was to establish a clear and actionable roadmap for guiding the agency's operations, investments, and priorities. As a part of this effort, since the Desert Water Agency did not have a mission, a vision, or values statements, that was a part of this development process, and those were formally adopted by this board on April 2nd, 2025. The strategic planning process was really a comprehensive and an inclusive process that spanned several months, incorporating input from all levels of the organization, from the board all the way down to staff members. And what resulted from these efforts was the 2025 to 2030 strategic plan that we believe is closely aligned with the agency's mission. And you'll notice here today with us, we have a number of individuals in the audience, and I would like to present to you our department heads here at DWA. They were integral and instrumental in the development of the strategic planning process, and it would not have been possible without them. And through all that input, we developed this strategic plan that we feel that staff can really stand behind. Also, I'd like to give a great thank you to Jeanette Williams, who is also here with us today. She is with the Center for Organization Effectiveness, and her assistance has guided us through this process. So today, I would like to move to our presentation. It's the next one. It's going to be in the next file. So for our agenda today in this presentation, we're going to give a brief recap of our mission, vision, values, our strategic plan's purpose, and the process that we went to develop this plan, along with the strategic goals, and how do we measure the progress of this implementation of the strategic plan. And then we'd like to open up for discussion amongst the board members. So as you recall, our strategic plan, the mission that we developed was to responsibly manage our water resources, ensuring ongoing sustainability and effectively delivering safe and reliable water for current and future generations. With our vision of where we are going to ensure a sustainable water future through sound fiscal and policy management, employee and customer engagement, efficient operations, reliable infrastructure, and strategic partnership. Now, our values, there are core values, which is what we have developed here, is reliability, integrity, safety, accountability, and teamwork. And these core values, they are what we believe is important for us to exude as we go about our daily work here at the agency and accomplishing our mission. And I'd like to pass it off to Jeanette to go over our next few items on the agenda.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to stand before you again today. It has been an absolute pleasure working with all of you and the team here. Just to share with you the purpose of the strategic planning and what kind of took this into place. And as Esther said, in late 2024, we embarked on a journey together. And so the point of the 5-year plan is intended to create a sustainable focus for multiple years. And this will allow you to have well-defined and well-aligned strategic initiatives, build momentum to achieve the specific and the significant objectives that we want to accomplish over the next 5 years together. The strategic plan creates direction not only for the policies, but for day-to-day operations. The strategic plan also serves as a tool, and it helps define what is the critical agency's initiatives to make us successful and to guide us into our goals. They also to plan a roadmap so that it guides us in the way that we work together for long-term directions, for priorities, and resource allocation. Its purpose is to help us be sustainable and and effectively deliver the water that we need to on a daily basis while considering the unique needs of our community and adapt to future challenges. We took this approach as a holistic approach and really an integral and inclusive process by which we had multiple touch points with not only the staff, but also the board, the committee, the subcommittee, or the ad hoc committee that was instrumental in guiding us. I have to say that if I had to qualify how wonderful of a staff you have, very devoted and committed with great initiatives to think about and was very instrumental in helping the department heads and the departments as a whole come together and bring really unique but very tangible things that need to be done, not only today but in the future. And then, as Esther had said, the management team is remarkable, and you should also be very proud of the community that you get to serve on a regular basis. So that was the planning process. Like I said, it was very interactive, also very ongoing in terms of the uniqueness of having conversations at many different levels. And I believe that the plan is a sustainable one, not only for this community, but the actual implementation thereof. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Jeanette. So moving on to our strategic goals. So when we were working on the development of this plan, of course, we need to define our focus. And so through our conversations with department heads, we identified these 4 distinct areas of focus that, that the rest of our actions and initiatives fall under, and that is sustainability, operational, modernization, and engagement. And as we discussed these individual goals amongst all of the staff, we identified over 219 individual actions were brought forth through workshops with staff members. And those were distilled down into 17 different objectives that were then had, and which you can consider as to be themes that individual initiatives align under. And so I'm going to go into each one of these goals and the objectives that align under them. So again, think of the objectives as a theme, and then there are the goals as a theme, and then each objective is an additional sub-theme of the goal. So for sustainability is to responsibly manage our resources to provide safe, reliable water and services for current and future generations. That is how us as an agency and us as staff, we define sustainability for our operations here. And with that, the objectives that we have is securing water resources, which can be considered making sure we have enough water that our community needs. And then moving on to conservation, using less of it to make sure that we are good stewards of the water that we do have and that we have enough for future generations. And water quality, to make sure that that water that we do have is fit for its intended use, and all the efforts that align under it to make sure that that happens. Also, we have our revenue resource planning, and that is to make sure that we have sufficient funding to be able to meet the operational needs while supporting our conservation and affordable efforts where possible. And lastly, under our sustainability goal is governance/board. So what that means to us is making sure we have policies and procedures in place for maintaining ongoing operations through knowledge transfer efforts and sound governance. So moving on to operational goal, and to us, that means to invest in operational readiness to meet current and future demands. And we do that through employee recruitment and retention, such as providing competitive benefits and pay to retain our skilled workforce, as well as attract new qualified work talent. Employee development, so we want to make sure that we develop our deep bench and maintain our deep bench here at the agency and create that robust pipeline of future leaders and specialty skills that are needed for the work that we do. Additionally, with our workforce, we need to make sure that we have the appropriate space to be able to house them and provide the equipment and tools that they need to do their jobs. So that comes with facility expansion. Due to increased state and operational demands, our workforce is growing, and we need to make sure that we have the space to be able to house them. Also, proactive maintenance and repairs. This is utilizing technology and advanced planning to proactively manage rather than be reactive. And lastly, our emergency preparedness. Through the development of emergency response plans, staff training, and engagement with local and regional emergency preparedness efforts, as emergencies we know are not always going to be confined just to the agency, but if a large disaster will be regional. For modernization, we believe this is continually improving to provide efficient and effective services. And the way that we do that is through our infrastructure, through upgrading our current infrastructure to increase its efficiencies and effectiveness, whether it be pipeline replacements or remote valve actuators in locations to be more efficient. Additionally, with our technologies, and this would include items such as digitizing our physical assets for tracking and management, providing reporting to support good management decisions. And with our equipment, which means keeping an eye out on new tools and advancements and technologies and other equipment that may improve our job functions and create, but this isn't just pursuing the new thing just for the sake of change and just for the sake of it being new, but rather creating test programs to test for effectiveness before full-scale implementation to make sure that it is as good as what it has been sold as. With engagement, this means to invest in operational readiness to meet current and future demands. That is not right. I just realized that. So engagement really, let me back up, is to cultivate collaborative relationships and increase understanding of Desert Water Agency's role in the water industry and community. I apologize for that typo in there. And the way that we do that is through education and outreach. This is to increase awareness of the agency and our services and our mandated conservation targets. As conservation mandates, we will rely heavily on educating our customers. Also by cultivating employee engagement. This can be achieved through providing opportunities for staff to learn about other agency functions, to fully appreciate the big picture and build relationships across departments. When we know each other and our respective roles, we can work together much better. Also through legislative advocacy, to continue to build strong strategic relationships with our elected officials on the local, state, and federal levels so we can call on them when we have a need. And lastly, our external stakeholders. Keeping in mind, we do have our limitations. This is not all external stakeholders because there are many. We want to be strategic and purposeful in how we engage with those external stakeholders to make the best use of our times. But we do want to make sure that we are engaging with others outside of the agency to support and advance DWA's initiatives. Now, this strategic plan, it is not a plan just for us to develop and to put on the shelf and just say that we have it, but we need to be able to implement it. While today I find it is us heading over the finish line in the creation of this strategic plan, but it is really the beginning of the implementation process. But how do we implement it, and how do we make sure that we are continuing to follow it and make adjustments where appropriate? So we've set up a strategy to hold monthly management meetings where we will be reviewing the progress on the strategic plan and its individual initiatives and actions that are supporting those initiatives. Also, during our regular board meetings or staff reports, we are planning to, coming in January, having a section within our staff reports that tells you how it aligns this item that we are proposing to take action on or discussing aligns with the strategic plan. Also, we are planning on performing a annual strategic plan review, so bringing a presentation to the board of directors on the progress that we have made throughout the year. And lastly, through our annual budget, aligning our capital and extraordinary expenses with the strategic plan, identifying where they lie within it to make sure that the money that we are investing in our budget aligns with the priorities that we have set. And with that, I'm happy to open up the floor for discussion and any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you. Director Grasha, we'll start with you.
I don't have any questions particularly, but I do want to thank you for the work you did. It's marvelous. I know it started out a little rough as an idea presentation from the board that maybe this was a process that we'd like to see the agency go through, and what you've accomplished here, all of you participating, is a document that the community can look at and know that this agency and this board is on the right track with the values of Palm Springs and those communities that we serve. And I'm grateful for the work that you did, and looking forward to all of these initiatives being rolled out over the years. So I thank you.
All right, thank you. Director McKenna?
I love this document. I think some thanks is due to our board president for initiating this, and my fellow committee member, and especially Jeanette Williams for the really diligent work. But the biggest thank you goes to the staff. This took hold in the organization, and it was embraced. I think it's a fabulous, necessary thing. I sometimes wonder, how do we do without Google Maps? I think a year from now, we say, how did we do without a strategic plan? So how did we? So it's a great document. I thoroughly recommend it to my fellow directors, and I think we should live by it, and I think we will. Also, something Vice President Bowman said in a different context. You did all this while running the agency. So congratulations for that too. Thanks.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer?
Thank you for the presentation, and I too want to thank everyone for their hard work. And I know it took a lot of meetings and discussions. And how many items? 200 and
219 and countless meetings.
actions. And I know we went through kind of line by line in our committee meeting and really wordsmithed in some different things that we thought the board would want during our meetings. And Jeanette Williams was very easy to work with during this whole process. So just thank you for all your time and dedication. And I think it's a great document. And moving forward, it'll be good to have something to reference when everyone's making decisions. So thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman?
And yes, you did this all while running the district. I want to thank everyone involved. It was a monumental assemblage of data, and then to cipher it down, to distill it into the categories, phenomenal job. And I must say to our GM, your presentation of it today, flawless.
Thank you. Well, as everybody knows, this is something I've been wanting to see for quite a few years, and I'm happy to see it finally here on our agenda. I'm particularly excited. If I had to point one area out as the engagement part, that one really stands out to me because I feel like, to me, it shows sort of a maturation of this agency, of taking it to a much higher level in terms of its engagement with the local community, in terms of some of the initiatives that are being talked about in the actual document. Also with the local political environment, if that's not really not the right word, but local politicians and our engagement with our representatives in Sacramento, as well as our representatives here in our own local community here on the ground. And just also the idea of engaging, having staff who have worked so hard on this document to begin with, then also engage in learn more about what happens at this agency. Sometimes it's easy to get siloed in thinking, okay, that's all I do is, wastewater treatment, or recycled water. But really, this is so much bigger than that. And I'm excited to see that sort of involvement as well with members of the team here. So thank you. Thank you very much for bringing this to us today. And unless there's anything else, I'll look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept
second
the
that.
strategic plan as presented.
Okay, thank you. I have a first from Secretary Treasurer Bloomer and a second from Director McKenna.
Director Grasha,
Aye.
Director McKenna,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer Bloomer,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you all for participating today. We really appreciate it. All right. So we have our next item, which is a discussion item. It's the item 8A, State Legislative Year-End Review Presentation. And we'll start with Director Yort. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, President Ortega, members of the board. Good morning. With us today, we also have Bob Reeb from Reeb Government Relations, our state advocate and boots on the ground in Sacramento. Oh, okay. I'm not really going to go through the background of the staff report because we have a presentation that essentially is going to cover all of that. And so what we're planning to do today is really dive into the first of a 2-year state legislative cycle and present kind of some background and what Bob and I and some others, General Manager Sines, have been working on. And so with that, going down to slide 2. No, the presentation. No, it's going to be a whole other document, yeah. So, yes, what Sylvia was going through was Bob's very detailed annual report, which has a lot of information, and the presentation serves almost as an executive summary of Bob's report. Perfect. So year in focus, some very brief high-level overview. Obviously, we saw that the state of California still continued to struggle with a budget deficit. However, we did see some movement with some of key water investments towards the later part of the year. Also regarding Proposition 4 funding, that was finalized in September. That's something that had a lot of discussion throughout the year, and so we were happy to see that make a resurgence in the later part of the year. And so that included allocations for recycled water, flood management, and $20 million for invasive mussel control, which we'll get into a little later in the presentation, talk about golden mussels. Also, DWA strengthened engagement with our local legislators as well as our association coalitions. Bob and I participate in a lot of the different aqua working groups that are part of the State Legislative Committee. I also sit on the Aqua State Legislative Committee, and we're involved also on the CMUA, California Municipal Utilities Association front, as well as CSDA, California Special Districts Association, in their respective legislative committees. Some key items that we saw throughout the year focused on protecting, or some, not key focus, let me backtrack. Some of the items we, as the legislative team, focused on was protecting ratepayers, reliability, and local control. There were a few different measures that targeted kind of different aspects of local control, and that we did that through active participation in more than 60 bills. And Bob, in the later part of the presentation, will go through some of those bills that we engaged on. And like I mentioned, the first year of the legislative cycle saw almost 2,400 bills introduced, with 1,500 of those in the Assembly and 864 of those in the Senate. Some engagement highlights on DWA. We sent 41 position letters this year, and we also met with 12 offices, which can include elected and/or regulatory. I want to say, though, last year we also met with 12 offices, and I actually want to consider this year an increase, even though it does look static. Last year's Aqua Spring Conference was in Sacramento, and at that time we also did a number of meetings for those who participated. And this year, the Aqua Spring was not in Sacramento, and so the fact that we were still able to keep that level of meeting number consistent, I think, shows that Had it been in Sacramento, we would have probably added 4 or 5 more meetings to this number. And so, which is great. General Manager Sines also through the State Water Project contractors has gone up a few times for some legislative related meetings. And of course, members of the board who go up for some legislative advocacy. I really appreciate that. So as mentioned, some focus areas were affordability, and there's some key bills of concern, as well as we did a lot of engagement on the DCP, Delta Conveyance Project trailer bill. I also want to, as some little asterisks, that these numbers don't include the numerous office drop-ins that Bob does. And it also doesn't include the emails or text messages that Bob and I have with staff and or the elected official themselves. And so these are just some photos, some highlights. As we see here, Greg Wallace, Senator Ochoa-Bogue, and Assemblymember Gonzalez with our new water. That was a fun little time up there. And then we also had an in-district meeting with Assemblymember Greg Wallace a few months ago, providing him I think it was a 2-hour briefing on the Making Conservation a California Way of Life regulation and how that was and is going to impact our agency and the greater Palm Springs community. And with that, I'm going to toss over to Bob Reed.
Morning, Mr. President, board members. Pleasure to be here with you again. And we had a very busy year. I'll just quickly work through some of these bills, and if you have any questions, just interrupt and I'll be happy to respond. This first bill, SB 72, is a reintroduction of Senate Bill 366 from the prior session that the agency supported. What the goal of this bill would be to update and modernize the California Water Plan, specifically to include broader stakeholder engagement in the process of updating that plan every 5 years. Also to set targets for water supply development across the board, whether it's surface storage, groundwater, recycled water, brackish or ocean water desalination, and demand management actions as well. To take that plan from being sort of a snapshot of where California is today, but to force it to look into the future, identify the projects, the investment that's necessary to ensure there's adequate water supply. This bill was signed into law by the governor this year. SB 31 is a bill by Senator McNerney that modernizes recycled water use and provides protections for incidental releases and adds a number of different uses for recycled water in order to protect the potable water supply and allow that to be expanded. SB 394 is legislation that would increase penalties for water theft from fire hydrants. It would also provide greater authority for local agencies to adopt their own ordinances to address water theft and, in many cases, the damage that can occur to the fire hydrant itself from unauthorized access. And finally, on this slide, AB 580 by Assemblymember Wallace extends the surface mining reclamation plan authority for the Colorado River Aqueduct to 2041. This is similar legislation that the agency supported a number of years ago. It included a sunset provision. This also sunsets, but the author and the sponsor of the bill, Metropolitan Water District, were able to extend that prior sunset for much further in time, as you can see there. This first bill, SB 350, is another in a series of legislation by the legislature to implement a low-income water rate assistance program. All of the major water associations in Sacramento and their membership, including this agency, had taken an opposed unless amended position. The agency and the water community are not opposed to a low-income water rate assistance program, but they want to make sure that a program is efficient, that it can be efficiently implemented at the local level without significant cost burdens being placed on the agency. Also want to ensure that the program is funded with state revenues. that there's not a requirement for local agencies to assess their ratepayers or utilize non-rate revenue for the purpose of providing low-income water rate assistance. This bill was ultimately held in the Senate Appropriations Committee, while Aqua and its work group that Victoria and I serve on were able to make the program in the legislation more effective and more efficiently able to be implemented. The nut that's not been cracked here is the funding. There's just not an appetite in the legislature to dedicate general fund revenues for this purpose. It is, as the bill and prior bills were drafted, it's about a $600 million annual benefit that would flow to low-income households. The administrative costs at the state and local level for that could exceed or be close to $300 million per year. So using round numbers, it's about a $1 billion per year new entitlement program. And it's just hasn't, this is probably the fourth or fifth attempt to enact such a law. We anticipate that there'll be legislation again next year. In fact, the Association of California Water Agencies State Legislative Committee referred a bill to the State Legislative Committee's work group to work on this this fall and into next year. It looks a lot like Senate Bill 350 DeRosso, but again, that working group's going to have to identify funding. AB 340, AB 1109, AB 1221. These are bills that are related to public employee organizations and labor. They all would have reduced the authority and the decision-making of the elected governing board with respect to employee relations. As you can probably guess, with a Democratic supermajority in both houses and Democratic governor, the public employee unions yield a lot of weight when it comes to legislation, and in their desire to improve conditions for their employees, sometimes they go a little too far from the local agency perspective. So we engaged on these bills. These three failed to advance from the assembly, and they may be back next year. And the final bill on this is AB 810. This would require all special districts to convert their web domains to a .gov or .ca.gov. Desert Water Agency initially had an opposed unless amended position because the original bill by Assemblymember Urban would have applied to special districts, cities and counties, but special districts were removed from that bill. This bill would have added special districts, but it kept the initial timeline for implementation. So in effect, cities and counties, based on that law, would have 5 years to make the transition. This bill would have only provided special districts about 3 years. And we didn't feel that was appropriate, so we approached the author and said, look, if you're going to pursue this, you need to give the special districts the same time you provide to other local agencies. The agency moved to a neutral position when we secured that amendment, but the bill failed to advance from the assembly. It still had a lot of significant opposition from special districts around California.
And there's actually one more I wanted to add here, and I apologize for omitting it, but AB 339, which is also related to labor. This bill we opposed, as well as CSDA, Aqua, a lot of the associations. This is another labor-related bill. Specifically, it talks to if you do have a bargaining unit and you're going to go out to RFP for different types of services, that you need to provide it to your bargaining unit with at least 45 days for them to make comment on that RFP. And so this bill went through many amendments and revisions. That 45 started a lot higher, and it slowly got brought down, but that one was signed by the governor. And so that's something that we're closely keeping an eye on too regarding implementation and the different contract types that it covers.
Yeah, we were able, with the broader local agency community to secure amendments to exclude construction contracts, emergency contracts, and other types of contracts. And initially, this was a 120-day notice, so you had to provide 120 days and be able to, in a sense, meet and confer before you entered or authorized the contract. And in many cases, that's just too long of a period of time.
And there were some emergency provisions added too for special districts. So, but we'll see how that goes. I think that one was probably the biggest bill that kind of maybe makes it a loss in terms of kind of what the associations were advocating for. On the next slide, Bob did go into the low-income water rate assistance status. However, I did also want to identify AB 532. This was a CMUA-sponsored bill that we were supportive of. It essentially, distilling it down, formalized the ability for water agencies to have their own water rate assistance program. So how we have our own Help to Others bill assistance program. There are some agencies of varying sizes that feel it's not as clear in the water code, and so this was just kind of formalizing that. DWA supported the bill, but this and SB 350, they were both held in committee, and we fully expect both of them to come back next year.
So you've probably heard about golden mussels, new invasive species that likely came into California through ballast water, an ocean-going vessel at the port of Stockton as far back as maybe 2022 or 2023. It poses a significant threat to water facilities, state water project. These mussels will actually clog pipes, trash racks, water intakes. If they get into a drinking water treatment plant or recycled water, wastewater treatment plant, they have the ability to foul not only the treatment process, but the actual physical infrastructure in those plants. Existing law only deals with quagga and zebra mussels, which of course you're very familiar with down here as they populated Lake Havasu and provided a threat to Southern California areas that bring Colorado River water into service areas. But the law was not set up to deal with other invasive mussels. And so we quickly organized. I'd actually done a significant amount of research early in the year and produced a memorandum for Solano County Water Agency, one of our clients that's located just up in the Delta area. They have an intake in Barker Slough, which is above that top red dot there in the graphic. And that really was shared with Aqua and Metropolitan Water District and others, and kind of provided a roadmap for our advocacy efforts this year. We met with the administration, with legislators. At one point, we had over 70 Senate and Assembly members sign on to a letter to the governor and legislative leadership highlighting how important it was for the legislature and the administration to act quickly. We were focused mostly on liability protections for all invasive mussel species. In other words, right now under existing law, if there's an invasive species that is identified by the Fish and Game Commission and you as a landowner or water system allow it to move from your property or your system to someone else, you can be liable for the damages that invasive species causes to others. Quagga zebra mussel law protects you from liability if you have a compliance plan that looks at how to prevent, control, or eradicate the species. And so we felt it was important to just expand that law to all invasive mussels, because believe it or not, there's a third one that's popped up in some of the ports on the ocean side that we don't think is necessarily going to get into the water systems inland, but we wanted to make sure that in the future, anything of an invasive mussel would be covered by the law. So the result was a budget trailer bill, AB 149. It expands that authority to develop compliance plans and have liability protection to manage all invasive mussels. It provides $20 million from Proposition 4 that was allocated to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. That money is actually flowing through the Wildlife Conservation Board. One of the concerns that I identified was that Proposition 4 provided $20 million to the California Department of Food and Agriculture for the invasive or through the invasive species account. But that invasive species account only authorizes grants to state agencies and departments, not to local agencies. We know that funding to address this threat is going to be a big need. I'm asking the state water contractors and some of our clients to identify the annual operational and capital costs that they incur dealing with prevention and control. And I think statewide it's going to exceed $100 million a year for all the water systems. This species is moving quickly. And so we were able to, in AB 149, to remove the designation for that $20 million in Prop 4 to the invasive species account. It still goes to the California Department of Food and Agriculture, but the restriction by virtue of that account allocation has been removed. So I've been in contact with the governor's office, trying to elevate this to their level to make sure that we don't just stop with AB 149, but we proceed to address ongoing funding issues. And so we're working to set up a meeting with California Natural Resources Agency and state contractors and some other folks to talk about next steps. It's kind of interesting. The response I received from the governor's staff was this hasn't reached the governor's office level yet. So we're starting with the agency, which is, fine. Budget trailer bills. As the board is aware, this year the governor proposed streamlining the Bay Delta Conveyance Project and the Bay Delta Plan. They did so by dropping 2 budget trailer bills during the course of May revision. That is an annual budget process midpoint, if you will. Unfortunately, the administration didn't lay the groundwork. They didn't talk with Senate Pro Tem or the Assembly Speaker. They didn't talk with many of the stakeholders. And as I said, they were kind of dropped on all of us. Well, the state water contractors and others really jumped into action on the DCP budget trailer bill. The Bay Delta Plan trailer bill actually presented some concerns for the water community because it would have provided a blanket CEQA exemption for regional water quality control plans and the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan. We thought that was way too broad of an exemption. So very quickly, activity on that budget trailer bill really dropped off because there wasn't any support for it. But there's a lot of work on the DCP budget trailer bill. I know the general manager here traveled to Sacramento at least once or twice to meet with legislators from around the state. Big effort, and ultimately the legislature rejected those proposals. I don't believe there's going to be any efforts in the legislature or from the governor's office on the DCP next year. But I've been working with state water contractors and others to address the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan. The schedule right now, this is, again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but we're in phase 2 of the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan. And this is the phase that takes a look at the Sacramento River watershed, which is where the State Water Project is located. and the threat for this phase 2 process is that the state board staff wants to require unimpaired flows from March to June that would increase the release of water upwards of 50 to 70%. That may be survivable from a water supply standpoint if you have a great snowpack above it that you can refill those reservoirs that you're kind of letting stay empty during the the winter months. But for a lot of systems, they don't have that snowpack, and it really threatens water supply reliability. So long ago, the water community developed an alternative to that called now called the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes Alternative. And that combines, it's the voluntary agreements that you may recall that phrase more easily, but it would allow water right holders to choose that alternative, develop habitat restoration projects, increase water flows on a more strategic basis, coordinate the release of water amongst all the participants, so you really target where that water is needed. When the salmon return, say on the McCallamy, water would be released for that, but it wouldn't require water to be released up in the Sacramento or Feather Rivers if the fish weren't present there. So it's a more targeted response. The concern here is that the State Water Board has identified wrapping up Phase 2 in October of next year, but we know that the State Board's schedule is want to slip. And the danger here is, a threat here is if it slips beyond the end of 2026, we don't have Governor Newsom or Wade Crowfoot, the Natural Resources Secretary, or Chuck Bonham, the Fish and Wildlife Director, anymore, because Governor Newsom's termed out. What does that portend for all the 8 years of work we've done? We don't want to face that possibility. So we're looking at ways to expedite the CEQA process at the state board, not to deny stakeholders the ability to comment, not to deny the ability of those who want to litigate after it's adopted, but really to try and compress that timeline so we're assured of having a final decision before Governor Newsom leaves office. So looking ahead to 2026, we have a new president pro tem and Senator Monique Limon. She actually assumed the office yesterday. She is a Democratic senator from the Santa Barbara Central Coast area. She's very bright, has a reputation for being a bit of a policy wonk. She's focused more on the energy and environment. And she will then be able to kind of reconstitute the committee chairs and her leadership team. I haven't seen announcements on that yet. We know there'll be a new chair to the Senate Natural Resources and Water Committee, because that's the position she held up until yesterday. So we're keeping an eye on that. Election year next year, there's going to be a lot of changes. And of course, there's the Proposition 50 with the new congressional district maps, as you've seen down here with Congressman Calvert, is starting to shift a lot of members of Congress, which then shifts Senate and Assembly, desires. Up in the San Joaquin Valley, for example, Assemblymember Jasmeet Baines, a Democrat from Bakersfield in the Assembly, is now going to run against Congressman Valadao. And so that opens up her seat. So it's kind of start the music for the musical chairs. There's a lot of key issues that we're going to be watching. SGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act implementation legislation, there's always a handful of bills that they want to go back, particularly in the environmental justice and social justice community, and alter and change the law that's now been in effect for a decade. So we need to be very cognizant of those bills. Funding for state water project subsidence, conveyance repairs, and invasive species control is going to be a big focus in the budget. The state budget is going to be in deficit at least for the next 3 years. The Legislative Analyst's Office is projecting between $15 and $25 billion deficits. This next fiscal year, 26-27, it's in the $15 to $16 billion range. FY 27-28 is going to be closer to $25 billion, and then 28-29 about $18 billion. So there's not going to be a large S of general fund money that could flow to investment in local water infrastructure projects. So we'll be focusing mostly on Proposition 4 in the meantime to make sure that at least some state investment is available for local water agencies. They're not going to be able to rely on their reserves to the extent they have over the last couple of fiscal years. The budget stabilization account balance in fiscal year 23-24 was $23 billion. The enacted budget has that down to $11 billion. The special fund for economic uncertainties, which is another bank account for budget deficits, that at the end of 23-24 was $23 billion. I'm sorry, yeah, $23 billion. The end of this year, it'll be down to $4.5 billion. And then the safety net that was created for health and human services programs was $900 million at the end of 23-24, and that fund's exhausted. So the manner in which they've balanced the budget over the last several years is going to be more challenging for them. And so that's kind of the general fund environment that we'll be operating under. Bay Delta Plan Phase 2, I've spoken about that. And then we'll be continuing our engagement with the associations and the state water contractors. There's a core group of lobbying firms that agencies like Desert Water Agency, of course, retains our firm. We represent 2 other state contractors, but we work very closely with the policy and technical folks at the state water contractors to provide an advocacy arm for the project, and we'll be very actively engaged in that effort again next year. Yeah, happy to answer any questions on anything, everything, and anything I left out.
All right, thank you. Director Grasha?
I'm leery to ask questions, but I do have a comment on the AB 810, the .gov. My understanding is we will be required to go with potentially DWA.ca.gov for our URL. I wondered, do we have dibs on that yet? I think, can you get dibs on, like on, I own several URLs for my business so that other people couldn't nab them, but they just point to the same
At this
website.
point in time, I'm not sure that we do, but that's something we can definitely take a look into.
If you can, I'd say you want to grab that because somebody else could have those initials, and when you go for it, you might have to end up with the entire name spelled out. And I don't think you can buy that on GoDaddy.com, so whatever the deal is, you might want to look at that. I'm leery to ask questions because it's such a ball of worms that I don't think we could get to the bottom of any of the financial parts of these bills that you've talked about. The issues that the state is facing are far beyond what we talked about here financially and politically. I understand the Attorney General is subject to arrest at any moment after a release of some details last night. You just don't know where this is all going to end up. So it's probably just going to be a show that's going to be interesting to watch play out. So that's where I'll be.
All right, Director McKenna?
Well, I want to thank you for keeping an eye on that sausage-making process in Sacramento. Sometimes I think the less I know about it, the better. But it's kind of staggering that the income tax revenue can go from $14 billion in 1 year to $36 billion and then back. I don't know how anyone runs a budget that way. And I just comment that we keep being handed mandates by the state. We have tried to cut our water consumption by 44%, which would reduce our income by probably 25%. At the same time, we have to pay for repairing the state water project, Sites Reservoir, Bay Delta. That just doesn't add up. So you've got some serious work ahead of you. But thanks for your efforts.
Yeah, that's a interesting in this political environment, both the federal level and state now. Affordability is the new word. And I constantly remind legislators and the policy committee consultants, probably much to their chagrin, about the impact of the legislation on affordability. That you, on the one hand, you want affordability, but on the other hand, you have these 20,000, bills that would create upward pressure on rates. So it's a challenge that we have that we never forget.
All right. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer.
Thank you very much for the presentation and your hard work as always, and look forward to a busy 2026. That's it. Thank you.
Vice President Bowman.
Yes, back in 2009, when I was elected to the MSWD board, I got to understand the role of a legislative body of people watching over that. And I'm impressed, the professionalism of your team and of our director here to keep us abreast of it. It is huge. There's no way I personally can keep track of it. But that's why we have professionals. You guys are like neurosurgeons going in there looking very carefully at what affects the district. And we're honored to have you. Thank you.
Thank you. I just had a few comments, or I guess comments on some of the items. On SB 72, the California Water Plan, I think it's interesting that this concept has been out there for a while, but not really acted on, or at least not in a very long time. And I look at it as sort of our strategic plan in the same kind of context of that, or our legislative plan, or our this plan or that plan. These are the things that you lay out for the next 5 years, and you say these are the things we're going to try to accomplish, and these are the goals that we're setting. And so these sort of vague statements, I guess, that have come out in the last couple of decades about, oh, well, we need to do this, but then there's nothing really solid to go to. So I'm really appreciative to see the work of some of the water agencies in our county even that have been really pushing this, and we've been a part of that as well. With regard to the water theft bill, is that something that we've really experienced in our own operation?
We have experienced it from time to time. It comes in rashes at times. We've had reporting efforts like where staff will, if they see essentially a water truck hook up to a fire hydrant without a water meter, they'll report it, and then we will follow up with that, trying to get them to stop and then enforce some sort of penalty where possible.
Okay. And along with the low-income assistance program, we talked a little bit about this over dinner last night, and my sense was, and you sort of alluded to that as well just a few minutes ago, is that this coming year, and this is something that I'm really appreciative of, is that instead of being reactive to those bills, because we know they're coming, because they come every year, that associations like Aqua, for example, seems to be more proactive in terms of actually starting to write legislation and get somebody to look out and sponsor that, as opposed to, okay, now somebody has a bill out there and we have to figure out a way to, as you've pointed out, the toughest part is still finding that source of the funding and how that will work. But, dealing with numbers like you've talked about, I'm less, to be honest with you, less concerned about the actual, if you want to say the entitlement part of it, the $600 million. I'm more concerned about the $300 million that gets spread out all across the agency world to manage that. It seems if you were a nonprofit and that's how your operating expense was 50% of what you're trying to get out there, you wouldn't get a lot of support in the community. So I'm troubled by that number. So I'm glad to see that there's finally some proactiveness being out there in the water world. And finally, just sort of a pat on the back to our team with regards to the legislative. When we'll talk later about the meetings, but at last Friday's meeting in Irvine for regions 8, 9, and 10 for Aqua, I sat next to Jennifer Pierre at the table, and at lunch she asked who our assembly member is, and I said, well, one of them is Greg Wallace, and she got very excited because she said, oh, he was so helpful on the DCP trailer bill. And I said, well, it might have something to do with the fact that while we were at his office, we spent a lot of time talking about it and getting him sort of ramped up about what other members of the Inland Empire caucus might be able to apply, to get them up to speed. And he really took the initiative on that, I believe. And so that's sort of an example of why sometimes these meetings actually results could happen. Well, maybe the end result wasn't exactly what we were looking for, but certainly his engagement on that. And I really appreciated hearing that from her. And with that, we can, I guess, move on to the next item, which is our general manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. So I'd like to highlight in this report that we held some traffic control and flagger training here at the agency. And that was, we had a presentation by Aqua JPIA. We had our representative, Jesse Cota from Aqua JPIA, who's our risk advisor. He provided instruction to our construction and engineering departments on safe and effective traffic management practices. And this covered key principles, establishing and maintaining proper traffic control within the work zones and other items. And during this presentation, they reviewed the requirements and best practices for water utilities for work conducted on streets and roadways. And this 3-hour course was conducted over 2 sessions and held on November 4th and 12th. And we had a total of 35 team members that attended this training and completed successfully. And, over the years, I've heard that from other entities saying that Desert Water Agency does a great job at our traffic control, and we're just trying to keep that going. So we are coming up to kind of conference season, and in the month of December, we have Aqua and we have CRUA, which a majority of the board is attending each event, and they do coincide with our December board meetings, which are regularly scheduled for December 2nd and December 16th. And so after discussing with the executive committee, we've decided to cancel these upcoming board meetings. And however, we still need a board meeting in the month of December as we have some key items that need to get approved before the end of the calendar year. So we will be scheduling a special board meeting to be held at 8 a.m. on December 9th. And also a reminder that Thanksgiving is coming up this next week, and the offices will be closed on Thursday, November 27th and Friday, November 28th in observance of the holiday. Over the past 2 weeks, we have experienced 18 system leaks, all on bare unlined steel pipe, which is consistent with our normal trend. And overall, those 18 leaks required 129 man-hours in order to repair and address. And I'd like to pass it off to our HR director, Ms. Hopping, to provide a highlight of her meetings and events.
Thank you very much. So this last month, not a lot of super exciting things since everything's good with the Teamsters now, so life got back to normal. We hosted a blood drive. I attended a BB&K webinar on the annual labor and employment law update because there's always changes. There wasn't anything that was of great concern, which is always a good relief. But I always try to stay on top of that as much as we can. There's a part 2 coming up, I think, in 2 weeks. And then we did have one new employee start, which was great, and he is actually a rehire. He left us for a bit and then realized he wanted to come back, and So the time came and we hired him back. So he's back to be working in our fleet. He's as a fleet mechanic. And then we conducted interviews for the conservation specialist positions that we have open. And we have I have to meet with the general manager to go over our decisions, but we're hoping to make offers within the next day or two and hopefully get those people on board as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'll pass it off to our Finance Director, Slough.
Thank you, General Manager Science. Had a lot of meetings since the last time we met. Just want to highlight a couple of those. So I did go on the annual tour, which was great for me because I got to see some of the agency infrastructure that I hadn't seen before. But I also had an opportunity to have a discussion with a customer who had previously worked at a utility, and he gave some positive feedback on our transition to the Tyler utility billing. So that was nice to hear. I also attended a webinar with Aqua JPIA. They are introducing a new portal for our property insurance, which will allow us to track the items that are covered under that plan at any given point in time. And then you'll also notice I had numerous meetings with our auditors as we continue to wrap up the financial statements that we will be bringing to the board at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just a few highlights of my meetings and activities over the past few weeks as we're continuing with the Metropolitan Exchange Agreement discussions. That takes the form of meetings with Coachella Valley Water District, Metropolitan Water District, and then Desert Water Agency, as well as with Coachella Valley Water District and ourselves, so that we can discuss the different terms that we are discussing. Also, we are coming up on the end of our Verizon lease for a Verizon tower, so working with legal counsel to get that lease renewed and really cleaning up that lease. It's been in existence for a few decades, I believe, with all the extensions that were available. And so times have changed and kind of the environment has changed and the requirements have changed, so we are trying to get that up to date. And I also attended the Region 8, 9, and 10 event, and which I was also had the opportunity to talk to the State Water Contractor General Manager, Jennifer Pierre, as well, and she also gave great praise to the work that we had done with Assemblymember Wallace. And also on the 13th, Assistant General Manager, Chief Engineer Tate and I, we attended the Recycled Water Expansion Project meeting. And so this is according to our settlement agreement with Agua Caliente Bandicoya Indians. A part of the term, one of the terms was that we would potentially pursue the potential recycled water expansion project. So we kind of had our kickoff meeting for that to start discussions with the city of Palm Springs for that, so to see if that project can go further. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. Director Grasha?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay. Director McKenna?
None from me, thank
All right. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer?
None for me.
All right. Vice President Bowman?
None from me.
None from me either. So we can move on to the next item, which is director's reports on meetings and events attended on behalf of the agency. And we'll start with Director Grasha.
So going back to November 4th, which was our last board meeting here, I, on the 5th, had a meeting with the Greater Coachella Valley Chamber of Commerce. On the 6th, the Desert Valley Builders Association legislative meeting. On the 10th, the Desert Water Agency IT training meeting. And on the 13th and 14th, I as well attended the Aqua Regions 9 to 10.
9 and 10.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And found it to be, for me personally, very helpful, filled in a lot of blanks to questions that have been lingering for me personally for quite some time. And then that brings us to today's meeting. And just as a aside, CVWD is having their meeting right now too, which is unusual, but they had their holiday, they had to reschedule, so.
All right. Thank you. Director McKenna?
Since the last meeting, I attended the Desert Hot Springs State of the City lunch on Thursday the 6th. On the 12th, I attended the Technology Committee here. The 13th, I tuned into Mission Springs Water District's study session. I've lost my notes, but points of interest were that they are on the hook for 1.2 miles of roadworks around the regional wastewater treatment facility. And they will be proceeding with that. But it's not going to join up 19th Avenue and Little Morongo, which it should, not their responsibility. Yesterday, I missed their meeting. I can't get it to play on YouTube, but I'll keep working on that. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer?
On November 6th, I also attended the Desert Hot Springs State of the City event, which went very well, and a highly detailed presentation from the mayor of what's been happening in the city. And then I also attended the Region 8, 9, 10 Aqua meeting on November 13th and 14th. And I think the a highlight for me was that Congressman Calvert was there and in person and took a lot of questions from the audience, which can always be dangerous, but he was very open to answering them all. And so I thought that was a good takeaway. And that's it.
All right, Vice President Bowman?
Yes, on the 11th, I did the security training, password breaches. On the 12th, our Technology Transformation Committee, and I want to say to, again, the staff, what you guys have done in the last several years since I've been on the board to elevate the district using technology, and the rollout of all the GIS, everything has just been great, and there's other good stuff to come, so way to go. Then on the 13th, Executive Committee, and last night, the privilege of being at the legislative dinner and to chat with everybody at that level. And prior to all this, non-compensable for me, but I did represent DWA in Australia.
Okay.
I petted the koalas and told them they were doing a good job. And I fed the kangaroos. And so that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Did they appreciate that?
They thank DWA.
Okay. All right. For me, on November 5th, 6th, and 7th, I attended the annual NWRA conference in Tucson. Of course, that was still during the time of a government shutdown. So even though the focus is on federal, it was somewhat limited, at least in terms of the participation of people who had been planning to be at that meeting. Several folks did attend remotely, but the meetings that we had hoped to have with the Bureau of Reclamation did not happen. So that was a little disappointing. Of course, it was still, again, as I said, a time of government shutdown, and it was right after the elections on that Tuesday. So there was a lot of, I would say, similar to last year's meeting, which some of us attended in Albuquerque. There was a lot of things felt like they were in flux, and so it was hard to, when you're having conversations about federal priorities, sometimes it's hard to nail those down right after an election, and right in this case, also, at least in my opinion, in the middle of when basically the government has been shut down for so long. And then the has already been mentioned, the Aqua Region 8, 9, and 10 event on Friday. Although it did not include a field trip, which disappoints me always because I enjoy those. But no, I'm being a little bit sarcastic. But I felt like it was a really great event, and it was apparently the largest regional event that's ever happened. Of course, it involved 3 regions, but nonetheless, I felt that it really came together quite well. It was up until almost the very end, a full room, which is a great sign that people were really engaged, I think. And then, as Vice President Bowman mentioned, there was the legislative ad hoc meeting yesterday evening. And with that, I have nothing else to add, so we can move to item 11, which would be director's comments. And we'll start with Director Gracia.
I don't have any comments or
Or requests. Okay. And Director McKenna?
Just one comment. Every time it rains, which is not that common here, we seem to have road closures everywhere. I know that Desert Hot Springs is looking at a system or some engineering to help the runoff not get into the city. But it strikes me that there's a blind spot in all of our desert cities when it comes to what is known in other countries as sustainable urban drainage systems. Porous parking lots, porous curbs, letting the water get back into the aquifer rather than flood people's homes. I just don't know why that's not happening here. But I'm going to go to the city council meeting tonight and ask them. So,
Good luck.
All right. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer.
No comments or requests, thanks.
All right. And Vice President Bowman.
Along the lines of Director McKenna, I want to thank the staff for training our staff to have traffic control during issues. My delay today getting to the meeting was the worst that's ever been. My area, of course, Desert Hot Springs, the county is part of it too, and Palm Springs. I wish that they would somehow figure out how to have traffic flow or to say, hey, construction guys, it's a rainy day, it's a bad day or whatever, don't put up the cones until after 9 o'clock or something like that, because the whole world of Desert Hot Springs is leaving Desert Hot Springs, coming north, and it's south rather, and it was really bad. Anyway, so McKenna, I hope you have, you can also use my name and say, you know, another longtime resident is saying, we got to figure this out.
I talk where they don't listen.
All right. I have no comments or requests, so we can finish this part of the public meeting. It's a little after 9:20. If we could meet in the boardroom for closed session at 9:30. And with that, thank you, everybody. Welcome back to open session. I can report that there were no actionable items taken while we were in closed session. And with that, this meeting is now adjourned.